So in my last video I talked about getting German citizenship, but on one point I wasn't quite correct. I said that if you're British and you're hoping for dual nationality, you're already too late. This is because Britain left the European Union at the end of January this year, and so British citizens applying now can no longer expect dual nationality. At least that was my understanding. I got my application in before that date, and so I was able to keep my British passport. What I didn't know, however, is that Germany is giving Brits dual nationality if they apply before the end of the transition period, which is currently expected at the end of December. So you're still in with a chance. But you might still be cutting it fine. There's likely to be long waiting lists for the necessary language and citizenship tests, so if you haven't yet had your initial interview, now's the time to get an appointment. Okay, but what's the situation for Brits living in Germany who don't qualify for citizenship? Well, I've got some good news for you. You're going to be fine. During the transition period, of course, you will still have complete freedom of movement in the EU, so at least until the end of this year, the only real difference is that you won't be able to vote in German or EU elections. Beyond that, the withdrawal agreement provides that any British citizen who was legally resident in an EU country before the end of the transition period will be allowed to stay almost as if nothing had happened. Brits living in Germany will first need to make sure that they have properly registered their address with the local authorities. This is actually a legal requirement for everybody who is resident in the country, so make sure you get that done as soon as possible. If you're renting an apartment, your landlord will need to certify that you are actually living there. Some landlords may refuse to do this for a variety of reasons, and if yours is one of them, you should inform your local registration office immediately. And then it's not you breaking the law, it's your landlord. Once the transition period is over, you will need a permit to continue living here under the terms of the agreement. As far as I know, the exact details haven't been finalised yet, but it should be just a formality. It is, after all, simply written confirmation of your existing status. This will be handled by the 16 individual states, so it may vary slightly from place to place. But my guess is that you'll need to go to your local immigration office with your passport and a passport-sized photo. One thing that still seems to be unknown, but correct me if I'm wrong, is what about freedom of movement? Can you still freely travel to other EU member states just like an EU citizen? Will you be able to relocate to another country in the European Union? As far as I'm aware, that hasn't been decided yet. Okay, but what if you're coming to Germany after the transition? What's going to change for you? Well, again, nobody knows. That depends on whether or not a deal between the EU and the UK can be signed, and if so, what is actually in that deal. Don't bother asking me or anybody else who doesn't have a functioning crystal ball. We do know one thing. The UK will be added to the EU's list of countries for visa-free travel. This means that you'll still be able to come into the EU without a visa for up to 90 days within any 180-day period. You will need to make sure that your passport is valid for at least another 6 months, and you will have to have travel insurance. If you're planning to stay here long term, things will probably get a lot more difficult for you. In the worst case, you'll be in the same situation as people from other non-EU countries. That would be a subject for a video in its own right, but let me put it this way. My advice would be to get yourself lined up with a proper job before you apply for a visa. I wish I could tell you more, but unfortunately, so much of this depends on Boris Johnson. So honestly, your guess is as good as mine. Germany is giving Brits dual, and if yours is one of them, then you'll need to One thing that still appears to be unknown, correct me if I'm wrong, is what about